I'm Dean Newland, and welcome to the Business of Intuition, where I coach, facilitate, train, and speak on the hard science and meaningful experience of intuitive leadership in business, so you can make better decisions, forge real connections, and creatively solve problems to amplify your impact and simplify your life. Welcome to the Business of Intuition.
I'm often blown away by how much I personally learn out of this particular podcast. Every once in a while, quite frequently actually, people show up, we have this conversation, and I come away so much more stimulated and educated, and my mindset has been blown, and today is no different. There was a wonderful conversation we had with a gal that comes from the Middle East in Albania. She's got such a different background and perspective in education, some of which I knew, but a lot of it I didn't. So it just was such a rich discussion. We talked about a lot of things, notwithstanding things like what's the difference between a growth versus a legacy mindset? How do we knit the conscious and the unconscious mind together? What role does the soul play? Yeah, we got deep in our own purpose, in our own legacy. And how do we as leaders be able to lead and communicate in such a way that integrates all of these parts of ourselves together? So we have this radical beingness that goes on that makes us so much more effective. The guest name is Irene Riad, and she is founder of what's called SIGHTcet, the Self-Mastery Coaching Institute. She is a speaker, ICF PCC Executive Coach, and Systemic Team Coach, and a co-author with the, wait for it, drum roll please, legend Brian Tracy of an upcoming book. She is a certified complex trauma recovery coach by the AOTRC and a certified Master Jungian Coach by the CreativeMind University. Irene's mission is to help people renew their sights of themselves and connect with the superpower of success, which they hold within, and improve the quality of their lives one generation at a time. Irene Riad on the Business of Intuition. Well, Irene, it's great to have you on the Business of Intuition, and I understand that you live and work a fair amount in the Middle East, specifically in Albania, but you've been trained and you have a lot of Western training in your coaching and so forth. I have done a little bit of travel around the world and visited, I think, about 19 different countries a while back. And I noticed that there was some subtle differences in how culture influenced the definition and the practice of leadership. Chinese might be one way, Brazilians another, and there's a little slight variation. What do you notice? What's been your understanding about how the local culture influences leadership, and maybe make some comparisons? Like, what's the U.S. style relative, say, to the Saudi style of leadership, since you work in that space?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Definitely. Well, the culture really is the context of how leadership, in my opinion, can be as successful and productive as we want it. In the Middle East, or specifically in Saudi Arabia versus like the Western, there's a lot of focus on relationship building. We've got to start with building trust, relationship-wise, even personally, before we even enter the leadership domain. And that means understanding cultural traditions around food, cultural traditions about how do we greet each other, spend a lot of more time understanding where people come from in terms of how big are their families, getting to know them professionally, of course, getting to know challenges and all that. But it's more like intuition kind of comes there too, because I kind of sense you, we sense each other. So it's not facts really, but it's in my presence and in the presence of the leaders in the Middle East or Saudi culture, there is an unspoken feeling of Do I trust you? Am I feeling safe around you? Am I feeling comfortable? And that takes time and takes a lot of coffees and teas and chat. And I think that's the biggest difference, not just in Saudi, in the Middle East, UAE, even Egypt, Arabic speaking, let's say, countries. And I think in the West, or what I've seen when we would have like multicultural and there are people from the West, there's more focus on getting things done or in a specific time, because I don't want to give the wrong impression that in the Middle East, it's not about getting things done, but things get done better when we get to know each other first and trust each other.
I could see a situation that you could compare a salesperson in the US and a salesperson in, say, Saudi Arabia or Albania having a very different approach. You know, we might, from the US perspective, want to start talking business and contracts and scope and so forth. Yes, we might have a martini or two, but it'll happen usually within that same time frame. And I could see where maybe it could take more than one meeting before we even start talking about business in the Middle East. But how does that show up, those differences, in a person who is a leader within a company? Like, say, I've got a team and I am brand new to this team. I am new to leading them. The US perspective might be that, start talking about expectations right away. And certainly learn what everyone does, but soon you got to start setting expectations and getting into clarity about goals and roles and, all that kind of stuff. And along the way, we got to get to like each other, know each other. But it's probably, to your point, more about doing. How is it different in the, like, say, Saudi Arabia and, those countries?
Yeah, so I'll tell you what I do, because that's how I've led global teams there. I've led regional teams, and I've had multicultural teams. But my preference or my way of leading my team is I start first by getting to know them personally. And it's not awkwardly like I want to get into your life. It's just but it's helpful for me to understand their context in terms of how are they progressing in their career personally? What are their challenges personally and professionally? And again, I spend time with them as much as I can physically or through Zoom, or at least we have more touch points. And then I do present I won't do it probably in the first session, in the first meeting, but come second meeting or third meeting, I will start presenting my expectations. But I will probably go over it more than once as well, because I want to make sure that it's not like I told you once and here, go off and do it. There's more, maybe there's implicitly the need that there is more of a shared goals are often discussed. There's a lot of discussion and agreement. And maybe it's the style of communication. It's not just about building the relationship. In the communication in the Middle East, it's a little bit indirect. So people may not tell you up front if they like what you said or not. You've got to get them space. You've got to be slower. Got to have time to check in if their opinion was really expressed as they wanted in the team.
How is that? That's a fascinating thing you just said, that some people might not tell you they disagree, but they could. You might have to find that out later. How do you know the difference? This is a really bad example, so I apologize. But I remember being in China many, many years ago and asking some people to help out in some event we were doing at a hotel, and everybody absolutely emphatically said yes, indeed they would, and then they didn't at all. So there was a sense of showing a face. This is my interpretation of, yes, we want to serve you, but that may not necessarily mean that it's going to come to fruition, or maybe not in a time frame in which you think it will. And so it was always kind of confusing as to, do we trust what they're doing non-verbally, verbally, or not? Mm-hmm. Is that you're sort of intimating here? Is that what we say may not be what we mean?
I think, yeah, it's interesting how you explain it. So as you explained it, I smiled, because it happens a lot in Middle East. people don't necessarily disagree in a group meeting because there's a sense of saving face, actually, or not showing up as being the one who doesn't like your idea, because it's something that they would prefer or be more comfortable to have a chat. And if they want to disagree, they'll do it very politely, or they'll tell you, could we have a chat?
But would that be a one-on-one chat, so to speak? That's not
more likely one-on-one or very smaller groups of people. So if the team was 5 people, maybe it's 2 people having a chat. And that's what usually happens with a lot of leaders who have big teams. Before they have that big team, they're usually having smaller chit-chats. Because then they're in the big team and they're saying, we have this option or that option, you would have already allowed them time to think. So it's not surprising them and having a pressure of to make a decision. And then he or she would have also kind of understood what is the general feeling about what he or she wants to present, so that he kind of knows already what the decision will be.
So, as you know, looking at the world as it is and the outgrowth of the pandemic and the talent shortages that are happening, at least in the Western part of the world, I'm not as familiar with it in your backyard. We're struggling to try to keep and retain good people, and it's maybe moved a little bit, but the pendulum of power has moved back towards the employee to a degree where they have more options. That might have come back a little bit since the last few months, but the point I guess the question I have for you, Irene, is as you look at the world as it is now, are these particular differences in leadership, while they might be influenced by culture, are they effective? So there's a difference. Like the culture might be where whatever it might be, like saving face, for example. Is that effective when it comes to your knowledge around leadership and how people work? Or does it sometimes get in the way?
Yeah, I believe depending on the context, again, it can certainly get in the way when people don't feel safe to express themselves, or there is a lot of education as well and training to be able to express yourself in a polite way and say no, or say I disagree, or say whatever. So that needs to be part of a leader's ability. As they grow, they need to be able to disagree. I think the part where you were saying, is it effective? There is a part where somebody doesn't get, like if somebody doesn't get embarrassed or feels a sense of shame is a big word, but just feeling a sense rejected, or if somebody's idea. So it's how we say it. I think it all goes back to how we say it. How do we express our disagreement or express our opinion that goes against what the leader is trying to say? But I think a good leader, the greatest leaders, are the ones that can express their opinion politely in a way that doesn't, disrespect the person who is saying their opinion, and also know when is the right time to say it and how to say it.
So similar. Sounds like they're
I think
not that far off when it comes to our cultures. I have one more quick question, and then I want to maybe pivot a little bit. But, in the States, at least, we had such a lockdown with the pandemic, and a lot of companies went to and had to go to a virtual work environment. The pendulum is definitely coming back, where people are coming back to work more. Some of them are not, but there is still this lingering isolation and disconnect. A lot of people are still having meetings over Zoom when they don't need to. We could just be getting out of our chair and walking down the hall, and talking to the person who's there. Did that happen in the Middle East as well? And where are you all? How's that for being really unfair with my blanket statement? Where is it now? Are people returning to work? Are you heavily virtual? What's the world like in your backyard?
It's hybrid more. It is hybrid more. So companies have opened their offices, companies have asked people to come back, but more of them have left a flexible kind of working arrangement. So when COVID kind of people started coming back, we actually put schedules to see which are the 2 days people would be in, the other 2 days people, so that we would alternate. And we were very mindful that people still needed a bit of social interaction, and it's good to meet face to face, but with the health and the flexibility being better off for some people, that it was a benefit that some people could still maintain. Yeah, and that continues. So offices are open. Management encourages people to come in, but is open with this hybrid, flexible arrangement that's kind of organized. Not anybody shows up, doesn't show up any day.
Right, and it's got some structure to it. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, let me pivot a little bit. This is fascinating. We could spend a couple of hours on this alone, just similarities between different regional leadership styles. You have, people don't know this, but, there's a form that we send off and we ask, the guests to the show, like, what questions would you like me to ask? And this is one of them that really stuck out to me was, what does a legacy mindset differ, or how does a legacy mindset differ from a growth mindset? I think that's a fascinating idea because in the States, we hear a lot about growth mindsets, but we don't hear much about this thing called legacy mindset. Could you define that and how they're different?
Absolutely. I mean, so growth mindset, I think, is maybe known a lot by the author Carol Dweck, who wrote about growth mindset and how it's different from fixed mindset. And growth mindset is definitely, I think, the foundation for legacy growth. And it's about always looking forward or looking at opportunities, not being stuck into situations or not being stable or static, or looking always for ways to the good outcomes or the silver lining from situations so that people can continue to develop and become a more whole person and so on. The difference with legacy mindset is that this is connected with your higher purpose. So you are growing, you are developing. That's why I say it's a foundation. You can't have legacy mindset without first having growth mindset. But legacy mindset is about having your legacy clear. What is that legacy that you want to create? And so there is a direction that's very much connected to who you are as a person, which I describe that as the essence of who you are, and that's the soul, your soul. And that's a process. That needs a process to really uncover what is my legacy. And I'm fascinated and passionate about that, and that will be coming up in my book, which is come towards the end of the year. Talks about how do we start dabbling with this, because I've started with this quite early. How do we put our hands on, or how do we know this is my legacy? This is the work I should be doing. Legacy could be very overwhelming as a word. Like people might say, I don't even know my purpose. Now you're talking about legacy. But to me, it's just like purpose, that it's something that you are dedicating to the world, and it's something you're living for. And so the mindset is very long-term, and it's aligned with your soul.
Great stuff here. So, so many things are coming into my mind at this point. So you're saying that purpose and legacy are knitted together. And then I know that, so just full disclosure, the very first workshop I ever conducted about 30 years ago was called Discover Your Life's Purpose. It was something I did for a while. So this idea about purpose has always been a backbone of my thinking, and has influenced a lot of the facilitations that I do. And so the thing that I notice with people is that they don't know how to define what their purpose is, let alone their legacy, or that they even have one. Yeah, other than maybe I'm a human doer versus a human being.
Yeah.
So then how would you help a person, and then maybe even a company, find that purpose? I guess my question really is purpose something that is like destiny. It's given to you at birth and you find it through the maze of your life and it finally becomes clear? Or is purpose more an intention, a function of our willpower, a function of our ability to decide, and that becomes our purpose or our legacy?
Big question, deep question. I could contemplate on this.
Yeah, right. Let's pause it.
For many days. Yeah, I'm like,
Everyone grab a cup of tea and come back in 10 minutes.
super. But I love it. I love it. Purpose. Now, one thing when you were talking, purpose is definitely a parcel with I guess you start with purpose and then see if that purpose continues with you on that next part of your life. But while you were talking, there was a big distinction I want to make, is that purpose can come from your ego. An ego can have its purpose, and your soul, which is that deeper part of who you are, which is larger than the ego, and it encompasses all parts of you, which is your ego, your shadow, your heart, things we like and we don't like. It encompasses the whole person. And we can talk about this later. How do we get connected to the soul? But the soul purpose, or the purpose of the soul, or the soul's purpose, could be very different from the ego. And so I'm very mindful when we talk about purpose. Usually when I work with people, usually I need to see, where are they coming from? Where's this purpose coming from? Is it very connected to their persona, this personality in the world, which is what the ego puts out, which is fine. But then when I'm talking about legacy, this is something that is going to impact humanity, impact others, serves others. This is something that to be genuine, must come from the soul.
Yeah, so let me just get a quick little clarification here. So you're saying that purpose could be both something that is generated from the ego as well as the soul, and they may be different. However, legacy is something that's generated from the soul and not
yes, that's how
the way you created this. Okay, so then
yes,
the stepping stone, the action item, the process would be first find purpose, whether it be ego and or soul, which then can lead you to this conversation around what you're like.
That's part of it. And then we go through a process, which I call the individuation, which helps the person understand who's talking. So is this the ego's? Who is the ego? What is the ego? What's the ego's voice? And then this helps the person understand if that purpose is coming from the ego, versus helping them, or as well, helping them understand the subconscious parts of themselves, the shadow, what they've pushed throughout their life, pushed away and has been hidden, which is called the shadow of the human. And when we bring these things, when we integrate them, we become aware of them. Inevitably, your soul, the self, your essence, you become aware of it. And that has a voice. And then we check in and see where is the purpose now.
Is the shadow that you describe the same thing in your definition as the subconscious, the soul?
The subconscious.
The subconscious. Okay.
Yes.
But is the subconscious the same thing as the soul?
No.
So how do we one, get the voices clear as to this is ego versus this is subconscious or this is my soul? How do we know that? Did you have any process that might help us sort of make sense of this?
Well, the first thing I usually start is I start the process with a questionnaire. It's on my website. It's free. It's actually developed based on the research of Carl Jung, the psychologist, who's done this individuation process. It gives us the starting point, just so that we have a starting point. And what it shows in this questionnaire is what your ego is about, and what is in your subconscious. So usually I start with this questionnaire and I meet people for the very first time just to even see if we're going to be, it's like my chemistry session. Anybody is welcome to try it out. I meet them for that initial session. It's free. I do it because that's part of the work I just love to do, is to help people become aware of their persona, the ego, and what's in their subconscious. Now, if people find that session intriguing or interesting, and a lot of people object in the beginning and might not agree, which is fine, but if it intrigues, it gives some insight or intrigues, and people usually work with me on such a process for around 6 months minimum, just so that when we have our next chat, we uncover the things that are pushed aside. These are things that are not necessarily bad. But let's say for me, for example, I was born and raised in Saudi Arabia. Actually, I don't know, I haven't shared it yet, but I realized that because I lived there and raised there for 15 years, at that time, I kept pushing aside expressing my opinion. I would listen. I would not very hardly express my opinion when it was not the mainstream. And at some point in my career, I have found that I'm not getting visible. I'm not, for whatever reasons, I'm not able to even say what I need to say. But I never was conscious. I thought I had communication issues, took communication courses. I took all these speaking classes, but subconsciously, there was a belief that I had just taken from how I lived in Saudi Arabia, that it's not safe to voice my opinion. Now, I never knew I was actually pushing that. So my persona is created, the ego created that persona as what helps me to be who I am in the growing up. But I've pushed aside something that would be very valuable. And there are other beliefs that I pushed aside. That's just I'm trying to express. So bringing that to the awareness is one step. But just because I know it intellectually, it doesn't mean that I've solved it or that now I can speak. No. I just brought the knowledge bit, but that's not it.
If I understand this from what I've heard in the past, that most of the, how do you put it, brain activity, what's going on with us is subconscious.
Yes,
like just a small percent, 90%.
Yeah, 95% is also conscious.
It's the majority of what's going on.
Yeah.
And that side of us is unseen or unknown by and large by our conscious side, which is the ego, which is that part that gets us up in the morning and gets us to work and takes care of kids and comes up with questions for podcast interviews, all of that, right? So all of that's happening. So then I guess if that's the duality here, how then do we create that integration if part of the job of the ego is to keep hidden the subconscious? Doesn't the ego sort of listen in on these conversations, get smarter at being able to out-trick us to be able to keep this hidden side hidden?
You're right. That's why that's why we call it deeper work.
That's why you're in business.
Yeah. And I found that I'm only, as a coach, I was tried to self-coach myself, but it's the ego outsmarts any one person who's trying to do it to themselves. Yeah. So we need a trained or someone who just understands this subconscious and conscious talk. We need a coach to be able to help us really put a spotlight on the ego voice. And it happens in discussion. So in a coaching session, depending on the situation that comes up, usually there's a lot of questioning technique that shows how the ego comes up with old patterns, old feelings. And it's also the body. It's not all mind. I also want to highlight, so that the thought has an emotion in the body. And we can't just do it all mentally and consciously or subconsciously. So the emotion that is felt in the body also speaks and has more truth to what is happening to us. So when a coach is sitting across of you and asking you questions, depending on that situation you bring, a trained Jungian coach will notice what's happening in your body, will highlight, and will work with the person to pause. We need to slow down. We are very mindful of how the ego comes up with things that the person says. And it's a process that really requires the person, they'll say what comes up to their mind, but then with our questioning, we'll help them realize, is this voice coming, is there another voice? Because usually your mind is not just ego or subconscious. You have other voices. So what other voices are there? Usually we have these conflicting voices. One of it is an ego. The other could be an inner critic. The other could be the soul. Usually they have a softer voice. And so when you're across of me and you say, well, I would not be able to give this presentation or go on stage. There's no way I can do that. But then you're the person who had applied, for example. There are situations people apply, they want to do something, then they say, no, this is not for me. I made a mistake. Or there was a part of you that had this courage, usually the soul kind of usually has a courageous voice. Ego has a safety voice. No, you're going to get hurt. Critical voices have a harsh kind of guilt, blame, shame. They're trying to keep you safe. But most of the time, these ego and these parts are keeping us safe because of patterns that the body remembers from usually childhood or when you were younger. It's more like a reflex mechanism. And when we work with clients, we can also spot, well, there's a pattern. Oh, you've said that also before. But this seems to be a recurring pattern, habit. Have you noticed that? And that process helps shift the person to be less attached to the ego, which requires intention, will, courage, stepping into some risk, feeling the discomfort and doing it anyway, because that's the only way you can start to detach and move towards your soul direction, soul voice.
So people will be listening to this and go, I'm thinking about them. I have my own opinion about it, but
yeah.
So you mentioned the soul several times here without getting too far off track in this conversation. Does the soul live beyond the body?
Yes.
Okay. Got it. And I would agree with that. So the soul that I have today was present in some format prior to this physical form.
Yes. Yes. We are a spiritual, in my opinion, we are a spiritual human in a body experience.
So I was having this conversation with my wife about this last night, about how it sometimes takes a group to up-level the vibration. And I was thinking about your former statement that the soul is aligned to a legacy, whereas your purpose could be soul, could also be ego. So it's a higher form, if you will, higher vibration, this legacy piece. So I'm seeing legacy, individual, soul coming together And that makes sense. So now you get a group of people who come together that do work on legacy for the team, legacy for the association, legacy for the school, legacy for the company, you fill in the blank, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that could get quite interesting because now we have a group who are connecting to their individual souls, building a legacy that's not just for them, but it's for the collective.
Absolutely.
So far,
you say that, and I'm a bit shivering.
So, does the collective have its own soul?
So there is a collective soul. Yes, collective soul. We're all part of the collective soul, and that's why we're all interconnected.
So the soul is not really just this little component; it's actually aligned to a quote unquote individual, but it also has its alignment to something that is universal.
Correct.
Okay.
And it might be easier for people if they think of it as energy. Yes. I think that there's a lot of that energy discussion in many places, and I agree to it too. But I really love the soul piece because that is energy, but it's very specific to you personally. And that's why I believe we all have a divine design in us. We all have a very specific reason we're here on this earth. It's not that I'm just energy, and I don't mean to offend anybody if I just say the word just energy. No, we are right. Energetic human beings, but the soul kind of gives me and this whole bigger reason for why I exist.
So it goes back to the question that I think I had before, which was you started to answer it, and then we got off on something else where the stake in the ground, the intention, the decision, the willpower to say, this is what I want my purpose to be. Let's just put it that way. And then you made it clear that purpose could be influenced by ego. So when we get to the level of legacy / soul, is that also a choice, or is it that divine design that supersedes us, that it goes beyond us, that the job of that point is finding something that was already there versus deciding to create it?
Now, I believe there's a choice. There's always a choice. We have a choice to move in the direction of that legacy and create it in the way that is, unique to us or works for us.
So there is a timelessness piece of this, but there also is an immediacy of being able to co-create with this. There is so it's not, I understand. So it's not like okay, I got a divine legacy and purpose or legacy and soul, and the job for me is just to find it, and then, okay, I found it, versus it's that, and it's also, I'm making some decisions here.
Yes. And I love it when you said the co-creation, and it's evolving as you create with what you have. Actually, this creative piece, I believe, is so connected to your life significance.
Your life significant setbacks. Okay. Say more about that.
I believe that we all go through setbacks in life. Some are huge, some are small, but every human being has had some kind of big setback in life. I have found my creativity and my courage and my soul purpose that's taking me on this path of creating my legacy by using what has happened in my past. I say significant because people often think, why do bad things happen to me? Or why did I end up with, I don't know, this person? Or why did I get laid off? Or whatever it is. But these significant setbacks hold the energy, hold the key to our creative ability to move in the direction of what is our legacy. If we are open to it, we accept first the idea and not use the significant setback as something that happened to me and I end up thinking it's holding me back or it held me back, but it's actually a source. Even if it's happening now, we look at setbacks. They are, I know they're very hard and harsh and tough, and there's grief involved and all that happens. Definitely, we need to take our time with that. But it's with that, when we reflect and contemplate what's in that setback, what is it here to teach me? How could I use it? How could I transform this energy to be a creative one, to push me forward? How can this light my legacy, light my path towards my life? And that's a key part in my book, because I'm very passionate in really empowering leaders who've gone through life significant setbacks. That could be anything for you. It's not about size, but whatever was significant for you to, power you forward. And it has a connection to what it is that could be in your soul guiding your path. I believe so. It's
a fascinating conversation. I guess I will close off by saying that I was again thinking recently in a conversation I had with Joanne yesterday about she made a point that when you think about it, you really get down to the world of physics and where matter really ends up being anything that's measurable. The human body is probably about, from a matter perspective, the tip of a pin, and everything else is energy. And so as we think about setbacks and ego and souls and intentionality and legacies and purpose, we're all working in this soup of energy.
Yeah.
We're not moving really anything other than energy, but it's a great subject. How about, Irene, can people follow you, connect with you? Tell us a little bit about your book, when it's coming out, some of those highlights.
Yeah, sure. So please connect with me on LinkedIn, Irene Riad. I'm also, or through my website, www.SIGHTcet.com. Or email me, Irene Riad @SIGHTcet.com. These are the 3 ways to connect or in direct contact. Yes, my book is coming out towards Christmas time. I'm co-authoring it with Brian Tracy, the legend. And it's called Radical Becoming, the Superpower of Success.
Wonderful. Well, I'll look forward to the book, and hopefully we can stay in touch and connect over LinkedIn and so forth.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dean. It was a pleasure to be with you and with your audience.
Thank you for listening to The Business of Intuition. If you enjoyed the show, please subscribe, rate, and review on Apple Podcasts, Google, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. If you'd like to learn more about Dean or Mission Facilitators Leadership, go to mfileadership.com. That's mfileadership.com.